Hello, I'm Esther Githui-Ewart. It's Monday, November 8th. This is Africa 54.
Ethiopians rally in Addis Ababa in support of the government's fight in Tigray, as pressure grows to remove Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed from power. A Kenyan climate activist uses rap music to urge young people around the world to pray for nature. And the United States is open for tourism as COVID-19 restrictions are lifted.
As the fight in Ethiopia's northern Tigray region rages on, many Ethiopians rallied in the capital Addis Ababa on Sunday in support of the government in its war against rebellious northern forces and against U.S. interventions in the conflict. Here's more with David Doyle of Reuters.
Tens of thousands of Ethiopians rallied in the capital Addis Ababa on Sunday in support of Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed's government and, in many cases, in opposition to the United States. Forces loyal to the Tigray People's Liberation Front have threatened to march on the capital, prompting a state of emergency. In Addis, protesters like Tigist Lema were angry at a US call for the Ethiopian government to begin talks with the TPLF, which has been designated a terrorist group.
They want to destroy our country like they did Afghanistan. They will never succeed. We are Ethiopians. We are children of Adwa. With which TPLF are we going to negotiate? The one that killed and raped us? One that stabbed our mothers and fathers with combat knives? We will never, ever negotiate with them.
Protesters also held signs denouncing fake news in Ethiopia. The government has complained about foreign coverage of the conflict, with Abiy spokesperson tweeting late on Saturday that orchestrated media propaganda against Ethiopia is escalating. On Tuesday, US President Joe Biden's administration accused Ethiopia of gross violations of human rights in the year-long conflict with the northern rebellious forces. The Ethiopian government has said it takes all allegations of human rights violations seriously and is carrying out investigations. Washington has also said it opposes any TPLF advance towards the capital. The TPLF claimed last week it is 200 miles from Addis. Abiy's government accuses it of exaggerating territorial gains. Under the state of emergency declared on Tuesday, the government can order citizens of a certain age into military service. But at the rally there was a call of restraint from popular singer Tariku Gangsi. He said youths should not go to the front line and that elders should go instead, asking for reconciliation. His speech ended when his microphone was cut off. It was unclear by whom.
That was David Doyle of Reuters reporting. Pressure is mounting on Ethiopia's Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed to step down, with 9 anti-government factions saying they are forming an alliance to take power and rebels advancing toward the capital. Meanwhile, the United States is calling for an immediate ceasefire. VOA senior diplomatic correspondent Cindy Sain reports.
Ethiopia's year-long conflict over the Tigray region is reverberating as far as Washington, where demonstrators gathered Thursday near the U.S. Capitol to denounce what they called a genocide by the Ethiopian government and a lack of action by the United States and the United Nations to stop the fighting. Also in Washington, representatives of 9 Ethiopian rebel and opposition groups held a signing ceremony to announce they are joining forces to replace the Abiy government. For his part, Abiy says his government will prevail and has called on residents of Addis Ababa to take up arms if necessary to defend their neighborhoods. U.S. Special Envoy Jeffrey Feltman, who is in the Ethiopian capital, faces a difficult mission Ahmed Solomon of Chatham House told VOA.
But as I understand it, he's partly there at the invitation of the Ethiopian government. So there could perhaps be an opening. There could perhaps be a scenario where there are discussions about, the possibility of a ceasefire, the possibility of finding a way through the country's challenges that doesn't involve the conflict spiraling and worsening as it has been doing.
The U.S. is calling on all the parties to negotiate a ceasefire and allow humanitarian assistance to reach the Ethiopian people. Former Ambassador Makila James spoke with VOA.
The U.S. has always been a friend of the Ethiopian people and has been a real supporter of Prime Minister Abiy. What we're seeing now threatens to undermine all of the progress and the promise of what Prime Minister Abiy came into office to do. And so we hope that this will not be squandered, will not be wasted, and that we can see ourselves all returning to a place where Ethiopia can be an exporter of peace in the region, exporter of development.
The U.S. is working with the African Union, regional allies, and the United Nations to try to create the right conditions for a ceasefire, as James explains.
So I would say that the collective approach is raising the diplomatic stakes, putting more pressure on the government, giving incentives for the parties to all come to the table, and talking across the board. This is not just a one-sided conversation. It's talking to the TPLF, talking to the Eritreans, talking to the neighbors, talking to the government of Prime Minister Abiy.
The UN Security Council is set to hold a meeting on the crisis in Ethiopia on Monday. Cindy Sain, VOA News.
Sudanese pro-democracy groups are in their second day on Monday of civil disobedience and strikes in protest of last month's military coup. However, participation appears to be limited by interruptions to internet and phone connections. There were also mass protests in Khartoum back on October 30th when the demonstrators called for a million-man march to commemorate those killed in recent protests and to call on the government to hold those responsible for the killings accountable. Those demonstrations took place amid heightened security. People were out on the streets Sunday in the center of Khartoum, although there was less traffic than usual. A teachers' union says security forces used tear gas at the Education Ministry building for Khartoum State to break up a sit-in stage to oppose any handover to military appointees. The Economic Community of West African States is imposing sanctions on Mali's transitional leaders after being informed that promised elections would not be held in February. Paul Ndiho has the story.
West Africa's main political and economic bloc imposed sanctions on Mali's transitional leaders on Sunday. That's after they told the Economic Community of West African States that promised elections would not take place in February. The military overthrew President Ibrahim Boubacar Keïta in August 2020. ECOWAS then imposed sanctions which were lifted after coup leaders agreed to an 18-month transition back to democracy, culminating into elections on February 27, 2022. Since then, the initial coup leaders, Colonel Assimi Goïta, has ousted the interim president, taking over the position himself. Progress towards the February vote has been sporadic. There had been repeated suggestions that it could be delayed, partly because of an ongoing military insurgency. ECOWAS said in a statement following a summit in Ghana that Mali's interim authorities had informed it of their inability to meet the transitional deadline. The bloc said sanctions, including travel bans and asset freezes, would be imposed. Mali's transition is seen as a key test of West African leaders' commitment to protecting democracy in a region that once had a reputation of a coup belt. In addition to Mali's two coups, Guinea's longtime president Alpha Condé was ousted in September. ECOWAS said it was appointing a Ghanaian diplomat as a special envoy to engage with Guinea's transitional administration. Interim President Mamadi Doumbouya has promised a transition, but said when the elections will be held, ECOWAS imposed travel bans and asset freezes against coup leaders in September. Paul Ndiho, VOA News, Washington.
Sierra Leone President Julius Maada Bio has declared 3 days of national mourning beginning Monday following a tanker explosion near Freetown on Friday. The death toll in the blast has risen to more than 115, with more than 100 wounded, according to a health ministry spokesperson. Clara Frank reports.
Scores were killed in Sierra Leone on Friday when a fuel tanker exploded following a collision. Deputy Health Minister Amara Jambai said the death toll currently stands at 99, with more than 100 people being treated in hospitals and clinics across the capital, Freetown. In a video from the scene shared online, the head of the National Disaster Management Agency, Brima Bore Cisse, said, "We've got so many casualties, burnt corpses," adding, "It's a terrible, terrible accident." High death tolls in such incidents in sub-Saharan Africa have been attributed to people gathering at sites to collect spilled fuel and then being hit by secondary blasts. A tanker explosion in Tanzania in 2019 killed 85 people. A similar disaster in Democratic Republic of Congo the year before claimed around 50 lives. Freetown's mayor said the extent of the damage from Friday's explosion was not yet known, adding that police and her deputy were at the scene to assist disaster management officials. Clara Frank, VOA News.
The end of coal is in sight, according to Britain, the host of the COP26 climate summit, after dozens of countries pledged to stop using coal and end the financing of fossil fuels. But as Henry Ridgell reports from Glasgow, weaning economies off coal won't be easy, even for Britain.
Burning coal is the single biggest contributor to climate change. Over 40 countries made pledges Thursday at COP26 to phase out coal entirely by 2030 for rich countries and 2040 for poorer nations. Signatories include big coal consumers like Vietnam, Indonesia, Poland and Ukraine. They, alongside several global banks and financial institutions, also committed to ending all investment in new coal power generation.
A commitment to end coal investment, to scale up clean power, to make a just transition, and phase out coal in the 2030s in major economies and in the 2040s elsewhere.
But many of the world's biggest coal consumers, including China, the United States, Australia and India, did not sign the deal. Emissions of CO2, meanwhile, have almost rebounded to pre-pandemic levels.
Behind this, we see a rapid rise in the emissions in China, particularly pushed by probably economic stimulus packages.
Separately, 25 countries, including the United States, also pledged to stop public financing for all overseas fossil fuel projects by the end of next year. But again, key Asian coal investors, China, Japan and South Korea, did not sign up. COP26 host Britain said the flurry of agreements shows the end of coal is in sight, but it still appears some way off. Britain itself is considering opening a new mine to produce coal for steel making. Prime Minister Boris Johnson has voiced opposition, but says it's a planning matter for local government. The local mayor supports the mine.
If we're going to have the green industrial revolution that we need in developing solar, wind, wave, and certainly here we'd love to develop more nuclear, it's all going to take significant amounts of steel.
Britain is also considering the development of a new oil field off Scotland's Shetland Islands, not far from Glasgow, host city of the climate summit. Meanwhile, the International Energy Agency said Thursday that if all the commitments made at COP26 so far were fully implemented, global warming would be limited to below 2 degrees Celsius, a significant improvement on the 2.7 degrees Celsius rise the United Nations forecasted before the summit. Henry Ridgwell for VOA News, Glasgow, Scotland.
At only 21 years, Kenyan rap star and environmental activist Anderson Mwakazi, popularly known by his stage name as Hush Kid Lucky Star, says his generation is worried that climate change will cut short their lives. He wants the world leaders to take immediate action and protect the lives of the younger generation. Hush Kid joins me now live via Skype from Taita Taveta, Kenya. Hush Kid, what prompted you to get involved in climate change activism?
What people need to get into environmental is that my family and I are subject to farmers.
I'm losing your audio, Hush Kid. I need to hear you.
Saying that climate change is the biggest crisis and has affected me personally. Me and my family have been affected by climate change because we are seasoned farmers. We have been farming for a long time. The age of 15 is when I learned climate change has it. We no longer, even as I'm talking right now, we no longer depend on farming anymore.
Now, you have released a music video that you call Pray for Nature. What is the lesson you want people to learn from that song?
Pray for Nature is a true story. Everything that I sang with that song is a true story. The story that everybody should hear. Everything that I've written in that is true and fact. Everything I've talked to it, the song explains it better because I'm talking about deforestation. I'm talking about burning of trees. I'm talking about destroying vegetation. I'm talking about destroying nature. Because I need the world leaders and everybody to listen to this message seriously because this is something that is happening. If we don't act now, I think we'll be doomed very soon. We have no other home to go. We only have this earth. I don't know if there is a rocket that can take us all to another planet. There's no another planet. I want all leaders. I'm calling upon all leaders. Everybody. Those who are recycling, those who are emitting harmful gases, they should come another way. The government should also come in. The companies should also come in. People should come together so that they stop this because this is madness. Like, I don't know if my children or my grandchildren are going to find forest cover in the future. I don't know if they are going to like Amazon. I don't know.
Hush Kid, the world leaders are going to sum up the COP26 summit this Friday. Your president, Uhuru Kenyatta, was attending that as well as other African leaders. What do you expect to see change when they wrap up this summit in case of Kenya and Africa in general?
It is very good to see leaders coming together, but they need to do more. They need to cooperate together. I'm seeing that there are some countries that are declining from signing some deals. They should come up together. They should move in one voice. Like, we young people, we need our generation to be looked at because we are the ones who are going to be hurt. We are the ones who are, I don't know if for sure if people won't stop emitting those gases. People won't stop deforestation. People won't take care of forests. I think it is the end. I think it is the end. We are going into apocalypse, actually. We're going into apocalypse. Let me take a reference of the Bible. The Bible says that God will destroy the world by fire. And I think the fire that is going to destroy Earth is global warming. For real, I think it's global warming. And if people don't take it seriously, I think somebody, someplace, maybe somebody somewhere will come and listen to this message and say that.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Hush Kid, for talking to us. Hush Kid Lucky Star is a Kenyan rap star and environmental activist. He joined us live via Skype from Taita Taveta, Kenya. Still to come, travel restrictions to the United States put in place early in the COVID pandemic have ended after more than 18 months. We'll have a report. But first, Heidi Adams tells us what's coming up on Wednesday Straight Talk Africa.
Be sure to join me for the next Straight Talk Africa as we look at coup d'etats in Africa. Experts say globally, 2021 was a bumper year for coups. From Sudan and Chad, Guinea, Mali and Tunisia, we'll look at the causes and consequences of the latest series of takeovers and attempted coups in African countries. Join me, Heidi Adams, on the next Straight Talk Africa.
Hundreds of people, including the current and former U.S. presidents, gathered in Washington on Friday to pay their final respects to Colin Powell, America's first black Secretary of State and chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. The four-star general and statesman known worldwide died on October 18th of complications from COVID-19. VOA's Caroline Presutti has more on the funeral service.
Tributes for non-U.S. presidents are rare inside the Washington National Cathedral. But as many noted Friday, this was no ordinary man.
Son, loving husband, devoted father, grandfather, friend, soldier, counselor to presidents, senior statesman, man of peace, child of God.
For many, Colin Powell was the embodiment of the American dream. Of Jamaican heritage, he was born and raised in New York City and went on to become the first black Secretary of State under President George W. Bush. Michael Powell spoke of his father's passion for people.
He loved a hot dog vendor, a bank teller, a janitor, and a student as much as any world leader.
Originally a moderate Republican, Powell considered a run for the presidency. He later endorsed Democratic President Joe Biden and former Democratic President Barack Obama. He publicly broke with the Republican Party after the January 6th insurrection at the U.S. Capitol. Madeleine Albright, a trailblazer like Powell, preceded him as the nation's top diplomat. They were close friends, although they disagreed on when to wage war.
He recalled that during one session on Bosnia, where I was advocating the use of force, he had felt compelled to explain to me patiently the military's proper role. When the book came out, he sent me a copy inscribed, "Patiently yours, Colin." And when I replied, I signed my note of thanks, "Forcefully yours, Madeleine."
The four-star general forcefully pushed the 2003 U.S. invasion into Iraq. Afterwards, he would call it a blot on his record, since the U.S. found no Iraqi weapons of mass destruction. Powell had been vaccinated, but died of complications from COVID-19. He had blood cancer, which experts say put him at a greater risk. Powell was married to his wife, Alma, for nearly 60 years. He will be buried at Arlington National Cemetery. Caroline Presutti, VOA News.
Workplace mandates requiring vaccination against COVID-19 continue to be controversial in the U.S. The White House is expected to respond this week to a recent federal court decision to halt for the time being federal vaccine mandate rules for large employers. VOA's Michelle Quinn reports.
Around the U.S., the fight over workplace rules requiring vaccination against COVID-19 is heating up. The White House is set to respond this week to a court order temporarily halting a federal vaccine mandate for businesses with more than 100 employees. Some states, businesses, and religious groups sued, arguing the mandate is unconstitutional. The Biden administration argues it is necessary.
There are times where we recognize that our decisions have a broader effect on people around us. COVID has reminded us of that. And that's why having these types of requirements in workplaces will be not only helpful, but it's a necessary step to accelerate our pathway out of the pandemic.
The Biden administration says it's the responsibility of the federal government to create and enforce workplace safety rules. But some lawmakers say the COVID-19 mandate goes too far.
I don't think people want this decision yanked away from them. I don't think they want to allow a precedent where the federal government could come in and just force you to do what it wants you to do.
With more people signing up to get a shot every day, some question whether the federal rules, which will go into effect in January, are worth the struggle.
We need to ask
ask ourselves, what is our goal? We vaccinated about 81% of adults over the age of 18. Where do we need to get to, and what price are we willing to pay in terms of cultural divide, acrimony, challenges?
While the number of new COVID-19 cases continues to decline in the U.S., an additional 70,000 cases are being recorded every day. Michelle Quinn, VOA News.
Travel restrictions to the United States put in place early in the COVID pandemic have ended after more than a year and a half. On Monday, travelers from around the world who are vaccinated can resume flights to the U.S. VOA's Arasha Basadi spoke with an economist who explains what this means.
Bhavna Patel has been a grandmother for more than a year. She lives in London, but because of travel restrictions due to the pandemic, she's never met her grandson who lives in New York. Starting Monday, travel restrictions from Britain and several other countries end for vaccinated passengers. Patel can hardly wait.
I want to wear a badge. I'm going to see my grandson. I'm going to, I want a big hat or something. I'm going to see my grandson.
Patel is just one of millions of people who were unable to travel to the U.S. for more than a year and a half. The pandemic restrictions have taken a toll on the U.S. economy in more sectors than just travel and leisure.
As people have traveled less and traveled more, it's played a big role in influencing energy prices and other prices of raw materials. And that then, of course, filters into almost every aspect of the economy.
Professor Todd Knoop says a strong tourism industry inside the U.S. has kept sectors from struggling as much as in other countries that rely heavily on foreign tourism.
Putting restrictions on the travel of human has also put restrictions on the travel in the movement of goods and services. And so in a increasingly globalized economy, at least an economy that was increasingly globalized up to 18 months ago, that has just led to a lot of, I would say, unanticipated bottlenecks. A year ago, it was the travel industry that was suffering, but we had positive effects on the supply side from lower energy. Now we're kind of in the exact opposite situation where higher energy prices and supply chain issues are slowing the economy down. But on the demand side, things are strong.
Still, for travelers like Bhavna Patel, the only news that matters is her upcoming flight.
Like if I could dance, I would dance.
On Monday, the U.S. will also open its land borders with Mexico and Canada to vaccinated travelers. Arash Arabasadi, VOA News.
And that wraps up our show for today. Be sure to watch Africa 54 on our website at voaafrica.com. From all of us here in Washington, we thank you for watching.